The thing is, if you become known in the world for producing, if you will, for making the first album of one of the biggest rock bands in the entire world,
Yes.
which I euphemistically call the N band because their name begins with N.
We
It's
know
sort of
we know who the band
we know
is.
who the hell the band is, so it's the gift that keeps on giving. I
Sure.
still have a recording career like 40 years later,
Right.
thanks to those guys who've been, they've been very good to me. But the point is, it's like there's far, far more people who've heard that record than any record that I will ever play guitar on.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives of living life on your own terms. Life lessons that keep us grounded, insane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast with your host, me, Daniel House, speaking to different creative people about their lives, their thoughts, their creativity, their craft. Musicians, actors, directors, artists, cartoonists, you name it. If they're doing something cool and they're interesting, hopefully they want to be on this show. Today's conversation is with my old creative collaborator, Mr. Jack Endino, also known as the Godfather of Grunge, a moniker that always makes me snicker a little bit, but it's probably well-deserved and well-earned. All of the earliest stuff on Sub Pop Records from like 88, 89 probably has his name on it. The first Nirvana record, the first Soundgarden record, he did stuff with the Screaming Trees, Green River, Mudhoney. Anything on those first 2 years, Jack's name is probably on it. But he's been recording ever since for like 30, 40 years. He continues to be busy like crazy. And the one thing is that he's not really known for being a musician as much as he is a producer. But he and we launched the band Skinyard together. He was a guitar player, I was the bass player. Between us, we wrote the majority of the material for the band. He's an amazing guitar player. And in this conversation, we talk about our past together in a band, things he's done musically since the demise of Skinyard, and just a lot of what he's been doing both creatively, professionally, and in life. So, if you're watching this on YouTube, we ask the favor of you to please like this recording, subscribe if you're not already a member, leave a comment below if you like what you're hearing, and if you don't like what you're hearing, leave a comment below. Similarly, if you're just listening to this podcast on whatever platform you tend to use, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts, if you could do the same thing, subscribe, like this episode, tell your friends, it would be much appreciated. Because we're trying to build this channel, and we have a ton of great guests planned, all exciting conversations, and I guess that's it. Let's get on with the show. Here's our conversation with the Godfather of Grunge, Jack Endino. Good morning, Jack. How are you?
I'm adequate to the task, Daniel.
Okay, most excellent. Well, you're looking good. It's the new you.
I suppose it is. I'm trying to blend in out here in Skamaka, Washington,
Yeah.
It's kind of the look out here, so.
Is it?
Yeah.
I remember way back in the day in the Crypt Kicker 5 days, you kind of had this, you were sporting the same facial configuration. I remember you saying how much you hated it later, and I'm like, I thought it looked great. So
yeah, I had a beard briefly. I remember specifically that I grew a beard, and then Kim Thiel grew a beard, and then I shaved mine off.
So do you think he was copying you?
Oh, I would never say such a thing, but I'm sure he thought, that looks all right. Maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I didn't want to grow a beard again because I knew if I finally grew a beard again, it would be white.
Yes.
But what the hell?
Here you are.
I'm a freaking senior citizen, so
right.
roll with it,
Exactly. I think you lean into it,
Yeah.
So we're leaning. I guess I'm officially a senior citizen too, or damn close anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We're in our 60s,
Mm.
which is a weird thing. So,
Mm.
and you know, it's part of why I wanted to have you on this new podcast, because you and I go way back. We go back over 40 years.
True.
You know, we met in 84 and we began collaborating musically in 1985.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first met was when you came to a feedback rehearsal because you were friends with Nerm, the guitar player, and you had this little cassette of stuff that you had recorded where I believe you played every instrument on it.
Mm-hmm.
It was the record that, for the most part, later became Angle of Attack.
True.
And you went up to what? Was it Tiger Lake? Is that the right?
Well, it was. I had a rental out on a place called Tiger Lake in Kitsap County, Washington, right after I left the Naval Shipyard where I'd been working for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I sort of retired to the woods for the first time in my life and had a 4-track machine, no neighbors anywhere near close. I had a drum set, I had a guitar amp, I had guitar, bass, drumsticks, crude drum set. And I pretty much taught myself how to record that winter of 83, 84 using that Tascam 4-track machine. And then I moved to Seattle in like May or June of 1984.
Okay.
And met you sometime in the fall. I think you were just finishing with 10-Minute Warning at that time.
10-Minute Warning and Feedback, both. They were
Yeah.
parallel.
Yeah.
Two completely different bands. But
Mm-hmm.
so what inspired you initially? Did you know you wanted to be a musician? I know you'd been playing. Had you thought at this point about wanting to be in a band, or like this was going to be part of your future at this point?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have a sense of what kind of stuff you wanted to play, or you just see what takes you?
I mean, I had a sense, but I didn't really know what it was going to turn into. It had to be
Right.
interesting. It had to be
Yep.
interesting to me
Of
because
course.
I was already pretty jaded. I'd been just really, listening to records since 1972, pretty much nonstop. And, if I'm going to make music, it's got to be something that doesn't sound exactly like my record collection. That was always
Sure.
my thing was always like, it's got to be original enough to hold my own interest, if not anybody else's.
Yeah.
So I was always kind of brutal about that, making sure that we weren't copying anything else too overtly, like, oh, that sounds exactly like the third song on this other record that I have over here. And everybody would scowl at me like, okay.
I think
Can't
I had
use
the
that
same
idea.
mindset, though.
Yeah, we kind of did. That's why we got along.
Yeah. I remember
You
a
know.
few times that when Ben started writing songs intermittently, there was a couple times when he came in and he's like, I have this riff. Check it out. And he played it and we kind of look at each other, goes, that's such and such a song from
Such and
whatever
such.
record, whatever
Yes.
Soundgarden record had just come out like the week before. Something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
something like that. Exactly.
He goes, it
Yeah.
is? And I'm like, yeah, let's put it on. He goes, oh, shit.
Yeah, this did happen.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
honestly, it still happens with bands that I record in the
Of course
studio,
it does.
but I have to be gentle about it. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that's a very natural thing,
It is, of course.
You love the stuff you
Well, look at George Harrison with "He's So Fine" and "My Sweet Lord." You know what I mean? This
Right.
is like this is what happens.
Yeah, well, at least the melody's different. So, okay, so we met, we started playing. I think mission accomplished in regards to the fact that we were creating music that was interesting and that didn't sound like anything in the record collection.
To us, anyway.
It's interesting because so many people still to me say that that's their favorite record.
The first record?
Yeah, so many people. And I'm like, really?
God help us all.
I'm always baffled. I mean, I can listen to it and kind of go, yeah, this is a cool record.
No, it has a certain artistic integrity of its own that doesn't sound like anything else in the Skinyard catalog.
Precisely.
I mean, we worked really hard on those songs for that year.
We did.
It was a lot of intense effort went into it before we realized that nobody gets us. We might be making the wrong music for this town.
Oh, we were for sure. I mean, I always think of like Skinyard as two different bands. There was the first record, and then
Right.
there was the other Skinyard, which is kind of that arc makes sense together as a collection of records. I think.
Right.
Even though we had different drummers and different vibes, that trajectory makes sense to me. So that first Skinyard record was, correct me if I'm wrong, was the first like proper record that you actually like recorded in a studio as a full album.
I think so.
So that was sort of the beginning of your recording career. I don't know if you like being called an engineer or a producer or all of the above or none of the above. Or...
Yeah, I don't give a shit. Whatever it
Okay.
was, that was the first thing that I recorded that was actually released anywhere.
Right.
And around the same time, I was recording with Green River the songs that became their little green single.
Okay.
Which was Ain't Nothing to Do, and I think it was Together We'll Never. It was a session that I think, they were recording at this basement studio. A guy named Bruce Jones had this place called Ultralab, and this was before Reciprocal existed. And they were, I don't know, they weren't liking the mixes they were getting, so they called me in to help do a mix. So they would have that green single. And that was around the same time that we were doing the first Skin Yard record in that same studio, actually. So these are both before Reciprocal Recording opened in June of 1991. We were working at Ultralab.
How did they know that you were available to record?
I think, we
were all so new at that time.
Our 4-track demo had gotten around at that point, and somebody heard it. Because remember, we had the 4-track demo from my basement. I ended up carting my 4-track machine over to Chris Cornell's rental house at one point and did a demo for Soundgarden.
Oh, really? Was that in West Seattle or was it somewhere else?
It was on Capitol Hill overlooking I-5. I think it was the place that he later shared with Andy Wood.
Oh, yeah.
It's long gone now. There's condos there. And we did a demo on my 4-track when Scott Sundquist was drumming for Soundgarden, actually. So, I mean, all of this was before Reciprocal.
Right.
So, I was getting around with my little 4-track rig.
Okay. That's pretty cool. So I guess your career as an engineer sort of started as a surprise initially? Like you taught yourself how we did this record, you were in a band, and all of a sudden you're recording bands.
Well, I was recording in my basement with the 4-track machine.
Right.
And getting really good results.
Sure.
And, it started with when we did the Deep Six thing that summer. Or that spring. When did we record Deep Six? Was it 85? I think it was 85.
Yeah, it was 85. It was 85.
Well,
I thought it was fall. I thought it was fall of 85.
Yeah, it might have been fall of 85. Well, I already had the 4-track set up in the basement, and we were rehearsing in the basement.
Yeah, absolutely.
From January 1st, 1985. Skin Yard was rehearsing in the basement of my house.
Oh, I remember.
That I was renting.
Yeah.
And Reciprocal did not open until, I believe it was July 1st of 1986. So anything before that, I was either recording at Ultralab on the 12-track Akai machine.
Bizarre, strange
setup, or it was on my 4-track machine.
Right. That's cool. So at this point, were you thinking, hey, this could be a career? Were you thinking of this? You were. So
absolutely. I did not have a paid job at that point.
So you had very clear intention, both in terms of making music and also in terms of recording music. And
Certainly.
I ask this because I know you went to school for, was it electrical engineering?
Electrical engineering, yeah.
Yeah. And you're just like, fuck this, and I want to do that.
Basically, yes.
Okay. So what was that? What is that
drive?
$5
an hour. It was obviously an obvious career choice,
yeah,
right?
Of course.
$5 an hour was a lot of money in 1985.
You're going to be rich. So like what was going on with you in terms of like you have this degree, you have this set of skills, you have the potential to make a lot of money doing work that I don't know, maybe is very boring or something. And you're choosing this whole other path. You're choosing this creative path. You're choosing this direction that is, very different, but I'm going to suggest probably more authentic to sort of your passion. What was your thinking? That
was pretty much it. I mean, I was working at the Naval Shipyard in Bremerton, Washington for 2.5 years as a civilian electrical engineer, designing the electronic controls for sprinkler systems for the engine rooms of aircraft carriers.
Okay.
And a very specific little niche that they assigned me to.
Yeah.
And after 2.5 years of that and basically working inside the government behemoth, if you will, I sort of said, well, there's got to be more to my life than this. And they were, they were paying me pretty well. And, it's basically just a government job. I think when I left government service, I was a GS-11, which was a fairly good salary. And I just stuck all my money in the bank and lived off those savings for like 3 or 4 years after that until the studio thing started to take off. So I had a little cushion when I left the shipyard.
Smart planning.
Yeah, it was.
Most of us didn't think that way.
I saved every penny that I made when I was at the shipyard and was able to live on. And you may remember interest rates were close to like 15% for a brief time in the early 80s. So I basically stuck it in CDs.
Yeah.
And which were certificate of deposits. And so I was like, I was living on the interest for a couple of years.
Wow.
My rent was $165 a month.
Holy
You know,
shit.
all the economics were just different. I don't know how you
Yeah.
would do that now.
I don't know how anybody does anything now.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
especially on the West Coast.
Tell me
Like,
about it.
it's, I mean, you're now kind of out in the sticks.
This is what we could afford.
Right. That's
Was
my point.
A
That's my point.
100-year-old house out in the boonies.
Right.
You know, anything closer to Seattle would have been like 4 times as much money
Yeah.
to buy.
Yeah, it's I don't really understand how the economics of that work for, 90% of human beings.
They work if you're a software guy or gal.
Yeah, but most people aren't, right?
I believe the average income in Seattle is now closing in on $100,000
Seriously.
annual income. Yeah, average.
Wow. Well, it's more than I ever made when I was there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you are now at this other stage. You're not really making me. You are still playing music, aren't you?
Well, since we moved here to Skamakaway,
Uh-huh.
I've only played a couple of shows, and they've been, let's see, there was one Beyond Captain Orca show last fall at Freakout Fest. That was the last Beyond Captain Orca gig, and that
Mhm.
was an outstanding show for us.
Okay.
And by now, our drummer, Patrick Lennon, has moved to Spokane. I've moved to Skamakaway, and Five Track, our bass player, lives on Camino now. So
Oh, wow.
the band it's probably somewhat impractical to continue that outfit. I am playing with Ron Nine in a band called Down with People, and we only play 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
And that's with Scott Vanderpool on drums and a fellow named Brian Learned on bass. And it's a pretty cool band. They're all Ron's songs, but he lets me come up with guitar parts.
Right.
And you know how I'm like, give me a riff and I'll come up with like a counter riff or something.
Mhm.
So I'm having some fun with that because, Ron is one of the few people who I would play guitar in a band with and defer to. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
Ron Nine from Love Battery. You may recall
And
called
Room 9 before that.
that's why he still uses the nom de plume of Ron
Yeah.
Nine is
Yeah.
because he was in Room 9. Room 9 gave Skinyard some of our very first live
Yes.
shows.
Yes, they did.
And he's a ridiculous guitar player. I mean, I just look at him and laugh, I think, well, I kind of think I'm an all right guitar player. And then he
Uh-huh.
launches into a solo and I just look across the stage and just like, there he goes. Look at him. Yeah. Go Ron, so we have a good time.
So, are you guys going to record at some point?
We're working on a record.
Oh, great.
I've got some overdubs to do, I think, on 3 more of the songs, but we have stuff in the can.
And you have the for the super old school, out in the weeds Seattle rock historians, you have the rhythm section from the Young Pioneers.
I believe we do.
Yeah,
it's
you
true,
do.
actually.
You do.
Yeah, I think Brian was in. Yeah, it is true. And actually, Scott was in an early version of Room 9. Scott Vanderpool
Really?
was. Yes, he was the drummer
So
when they
that would
first
make-
started. It was Vanderpool.
That would kind of make sense. Just that circle of
They all know
musicians and
each other,
everything. Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm,
of course.
I'm like the young guy in the band or the outsider or something. I don't know. Not really the young guy, but you know what I'm saying. I'm the new guy in the band.
Yeah. So real quick, just for people that might be listening to this or watching it on YouTube, just tell people what Beyond Captain Orca is. I know, but a lot of people may not. And I think it's a kind of a fascinating project.
Well, after my last few bands that I was in a band called Upwell as a bass player off and on for almost 20 years. I was in MKB Ultra with my wife Mia and a crack team of players, actually. It was a pretty cool band. We played for a few years. And I was also in a band called Candy Coated, both with the letter K in those words, that featured a well-known snowboardist
Right.
and artist
Right.
named Jamie Lynn from Auburn, who's from him I learned a lot about the snowboard world, which I had had nothing to do with, because the band got invited to play ski resorts. And we were basically somewhere between a grunge band and a skate punk band, because these guys were all, that's what they grew up doing. And I ended up joining the band as the lead guitar player, and I had a great time with these guys because that's a whole different world. It's a whole different audience. Playing at a ski resort, hello? People get done with the slopes, and they're like, they go to there's usually a club or a bar next to the base of the ski lift.
Right.
And at night, it gets dark. Everybody wants to party. And band shows up, and it's like, oh, there's Jamie Lynn. Let's get his autograph. He's the famous snowboarder guy. He's one of the founders of the sport. And he's a really humble guy, and he's a pretty good singer and guitar player. And I had a great time with those guys. And we made 2 albums and played for a few years. Volcom sponsored us and even gave us a van to tour around in. They loaned us the company truck. It was a truck.
Had there been records with them before you joined, or you were there the whole time?
There was one record before I joined, and then I joined halfway through the second record because they were recording with me and the guitar player left. I said, I'll play the last few solos and bam, then I'm in a band, This is how it works. So that band did pretty well. And then, up to now, then at a certain point, I talked to the rhythm section from MKB Ultra, which was 5-track and Patrick Lennon. And I said, I want to do this other thing because I knew they were good improvisers. These guys were like, you could turn on a dime with them and they were just, there was this telepathy going
right there.
The two of them as a rhythm section were amazing. And I kind of vibed with it. I said, why don't we start a band that has no songs, no rehearsal, no singer, no overhead, because you don't have a practice place.
Because there's no rehearsal.
There's no rehearsal, there's no songs.
Right,
You just get up. We're going to get up. The mission is get on stage and without planning anything, start playing. The mission is to cast a spell over the room, draw people in, not push people away with wheedly guitar kind of stuff. Like it's not about soloing or, jazz form where you have like some structure and then everybody takes turn doing their solo and then you go back. No, I said, I want this completely free form. The goal is draw people in, cast a spell over the room. Whatever people are doing, make them stop and look at you and go, wait a minute, what's going on over there on stage? And it worked. We played for, I don't know, almost 5 years, I think, maybe longer. Our first gigs might have been 2016, 2017. It's kind of blurry now. And I started recording the shows multi-track by various means and mixing them, and we'd pop them up on our Bandcamp site, which is beyondcaptainorca.bandcamp.com. And people started buying them.
Sure.
So it's like we made, 37 albums or some crazy number like that, because the shows are all like 40, 50 minutes, an hour. Right, and there'd be like, a total of 3, there might be 2 or 3 breaks total in the whole period. We would, because you run out of steam on an idea and you stop and everybody claps and then you go, okay, let's try something else. But we never planned it.
Right.
We didn't say, we're going to do a reggae groove in A or something. We would never, ever, ever do that. So it was a sort of a proof of concept band. I wanted to know, can this be done and will people enjoy it? And sometimes we got people dancing. It was always a surprise what would happen at these shows.
I assume to some degree that you would kind of find grooves.
Yes, exactly.
Rhythmically. If you want to captivate an audience, you can't do it if you're too just out there in space.
No, you can't.
Some kind of like rhythmic thing that.
Yeah, you can't be all spastic and solo-y and noodly, and it can't be like statistically dense, to use Frank Zappa's famous term. You've got to draw people in. And I'm not a noodly guitar player anymore, honestly. I'm very much a slow hand. I prefer to work with sort of sheets of sound. And
even with Skinyard, though, I never thought of you as a noodly guitar player.
After the first record.
Fair enough.
Pretty damn noodly on that first record. Guilty, absolutely guilty. And then I came to my senses and was like, this is stupid. I mean, there's always going to be a faster guitar player. I'm going to go the other way and get slower. And that's when I started learning about feedback and texture. And
that's what I always loved about you as a guitar player. And I have to say, I've always thought that you never got enough due and respect for what a great guitar player you are, because I think you're an incredibly innovative guitar player.
Well, God bless you for that. I appreciate it.
No, really. Like there's only so many guitar players from that whole Seattle scene that I really kind of go, hold on, what are they doing? Like I think of you, I think of Kim Thiel. I kind of think of you too very similarly sometimes, because I think there's aspects of your playing that are similar.
He never plays the same solo twice, for one thing, which I'd have to be guilty also,
Yeah. But what I loved about your quote unquote solos was that for the most part, they weren't necessarily about melodic ideas or noodlies or whatever, but they really were about texture and sound and feedback. And that's a completely different sort of approach to the guitar solo.
It is.
It's treating that kind of canvas very differently,
Yeah.
And that's something I always loved about Skinyard was like, oh, there's that cool part. It's not a solo. It's a cool part.
I would try and come up with, let's make a musically interesting little symphony of guitar overdubs here, where there would normally be some ripping guitar solo, wheedly, 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 here's a chain of licks in series. It's like, no, let's make a little composition out of it, but have it be sort of semi-improvised. That's one thing I did with some of the early stuff I recorded, is we would record an improv, and then I would overdub stuff on the improv.
Right.
By learning the improv, I'd memorize it, and then I'd go, well, what would I play along with this if this was a song? You could experiment with this all you want, but I have enough Beyond Captain Orca stuff recorded with just the basic 3-piece that if I wanted to, I could take those recordings and
do what you
just
loop, explained.
So I grab pieces of them and loop them and stick them together and then improvise on those. I could probably make another 100 albums out of that stuff, but life is short.
The question is, would you enjoy doing that? Because
There's a reason. There's a reason I haven't done it.
okay, I was going to say,
It's work.
if you did, you should,
I know. Someday maybe I will, but it's just proof of concept sort of stuff, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, I appreciate props.
I think a lot of people would agree. I do.
The thing is, if you become known in the world for producing, if you will, for making the first album of one of the biggest rock bands in the entire world,
Yes.
Which I euphemistically call the N band, because their name begins with N.
We know who the band is.
We know who the hell the band is. So God bless them.
Slap their logo as a quick B-roll cut in.
It's fine, No, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I still have a recording career like 40 years later.
Right.
Thanks to those guys who've been, they've been very good to me. But the point is, it's like there's far, far more people who've heard that record than any record that I will ever play guitar on.
Sure.
So it is what it is,
Yeah. It's kind of amazing. You would have a different career had it not been for, them and also Soundgarden and, a number of different bands. I'm constantly barraged online with people asking about the various shows that Nirvana opened for Skinyard. A lot of people they never opened for you. I'm like, yeah, they actually did several times. I have the dates and I just want to talk to you about your memories of each of those dates. And those shows.
There aren't any. I wasn't watching them.
But you didn't watch the band? You didn't watch Nirvana
when
they opened for? Really?
I did not. No, I was usually out in the van trying to come up with a set list.
Okay.
Otherwise just, saving my hearing or something. I don't remember actually watching them play even once.
That's funny. Well, we'll have this discussion anyway, and I'll back up a little further because it's one of my favorite memories and kind of one of my favorite stories, actually. And that's when we had a rehearsal. And you had just recorded the demo the weekend before, and you came in and you were really animated and kind of excited, and you're like, oh, dude, I'm probably saying dude wrong, in non-Jack fashion, but you were like, I just recorded this band, and you got to hear it, you got to hear this, and we're like, okay. And maybe you remember this differently because it was a long time ago.
No, this is what I was doing. It was probably the recording I did with Dale Crover on drums.
Yeah, it was. Much of which later became Incesticide. But I remember you got to hear this. And we sat down. We literally delayed the beginning of rehearsal because we were listening to this tape of that first set of songs. Oh. And I remember all of us kind of going, whoa. It was immediate. It was unquestionable. It was undeniable.
Yeah.
And the thing is, for me anyway, I think maybe a couple of us oh, why bother? Because it was so immediately good and it was so obvious. And as a band, Skinyard always worked really hard at arrangements and just getting every nuance.
Yeah, no, we were very deliberate. We had to rehearse. I mean, these guys came in and banged it all out in one take in each freaking song.
I know.
And then he did all the vocals in one take after that, And, oh boy, they'd made it look easy.
Yeah, exactly. And I just remember kind of going, oh God. They're the real deal, and so for a little while, I think I had this feeling of imposter syndrome or something. But anyway, I remember we're like, let's call them up and let's see if they want to play with us for our next show. And I remember calling Kurt and saying, hey, do you want to play our next show? And for whatever reason, I think they had a conflict or they already had a show somewhere else, so they couldn't do it. So they played the next show after that with us that we had, which happened to be the July 30th show at Squid Row.
Yeah.
Just the two of us, which, is kind of legendary. I think it was their second show ever in Seattle, if I'm not mistaken.
May have been their third. I've gone deep on this. It might have been their third because they did at least one show at the Central with two people in the audience.
Oh,
so it's not very well remembered.
Okay.
Anyway, it was definitely an early show. It was probably their first show that was attended by a lot of people.
It was attended by a lot of people.
Yeah.
I remember it was a Saturday. We were headlining on a tiny stage that was the size of a cracker. And I remember Chad had those funny drums with those,
yes, they're on you can see them on the cover of Bleach, actually.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Those crazy drums. And I remember that show because I was right up front center. And I remember how just kind of awkward and uncomfortable they seemed,
It's true.
And partially because, Chris is 7 feet tall and lanky and it was a tiny stage. And I remember Kurt almost seemed like he was afraid of the mic.
The fact is that the songs were a little difficult to sing and play at the same time.
Sure.
His songwriting had to evolve so that the simple guitar parts were where the singing was. I had to do the same thing with my solo band, Endino's Earthworm, which I forgot to mention. That was the last significant project I had. You have to learn, once you start singing, it changes your songwriting.
Sure.
And
That
the
makes sense
initial
to me.
stuff that Nirvana did was kind of like the initial stuff I did and the stuff we did in Skinyard before Ben joined, which was you jam a bunch of riffs together. Oh, that's fun. We'll go from here. We'll do this riff here, and then we'll do... And then you try and sing over it, and you're like, wait a minute, my fingers don't work anymore because I'm trying to sing. It's impossible. So you have to basically structure the singing to go over the parts that are easier to play, which Kurt did. It's an evolution that many of us went through, and he hadn't done that yet.
But I also think he hadn't yet developed the confidence that would eventually just be
that's true too. Basically, the
they
songs
were such a
were
young band at this point.
Yeah, they were totally new, and he just wasn't comfortable on stage yet, and he hadn't like I said, he hadn't worked out that secret of being able to deliver a really good vocal is. That's the part where you do the simple strum chords.
But I do remember they sounded great.
Right.
Like
the parts
they
were
looked,
good.
What I was hearing and what I was seeing did not quite match up, but they were great. I mean, and I just remember it being a really fun night. I was going to ask you, are you the one that designed that poster that says Skinyard Nirvana with the old 50s car?
Yes.
That's
Guilty.
you.
It's a terrible poster. I'm
love
sorry.
that poster.
Guilty as charged.
I love that poster.
I totally ripped off the Metallica logo.
No, man, it's totally cool.
I just thought it was funny, actually, because there's,
I only recently just became aware of the fact that you, because for years I'm like, I don't know who designed that. And then I just discovered it's like, oh, that was Jack. I'm like, no shit.
No, there's a reason I didn't do a lot of Skinyard posters, actually.
I actually really like that poster.
Extremely few.
Yeah, well, I did the vast majority.
You did the vast majority.
Yeah, and So the next time we played with Nirvana was that November. It was a Wednesday, and up in Speedio Tubbs.
That was the Bellingham show with Coffin Break.
With Coffin Break, it was Nirvana, and then Coffin Break, and then us. And I don't actually remember a whole lot about that show. I don't think a lot of people were in attendance.
I believe there may be footage from somewhere of Nirvana playing it. I've seen still photos that look like they might have been taken on that stage.
Do you have any recollection of that show? Of anybody? Of us? Of Coffin Break? Of Nirvana?
Not much.
Yeah, I don't either.
I have a vague memory of what it looked like just because I remember some photos that appeared.
And I think it was like downstairs in a basement, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there was like a little curtain behind the stage, maybe, I don't really remember.
That was the poster for that show was that classic one that Jim Blanchard did, which is just this amazing.
I thought that was you.
No. With a weird guy. Yeah, that was a Jim Blanchard design.
Okay. And then when was the next one? If we're going to keep talking about Nirvana.
Yeah, and then we'll get off of this. The next one was February of '89, and that was we'll just say legendary, the Hub Ballroom show at UW campus with us, Girl Trouble, Fluid, and Nirvana. And we were the headliners.
Correct.
But we kind of pulled a dick move, and we made Girl Trouble go on last.
That was you.
Okay, I pulled a dick
But whatever,
move.
All's good now. I get along with Trouble.
I will happily own that I was the one being the dick move. But the thing is, it actually ended up not being a dick move.
No, people stayed.
Everybody stayed, and Girl Trouble fucking killed it. Like,
slayed it.
Every single band that night was just amazing.
Yeah, it's true.
And I remember that show as just being just amazing, fantastic. Huge room.
It's the only time I remember Ben McMillan crowd surfing. I don't know if that ever happened again in Seattle.
Yeah. And there's that poster of us. I don't know if you remember, there's this great poster of us kind of shot from the side. And there's this hand sticking up from the crowd in front of the stage holding a rubber chicken.
Yes. I believe that's inside our Fist Size Chunks album fold out, actually.
I wonder who that was.
Who was the rubber chicken guy?
Who brings a rubber chicken to the show?
Right.
I don't know.
It's a good question. Maybe somebody will tell us.
So
but,
the very
So you're
last...
forgetting there was one more. There was a fourth one, which was
I'm getting to the fourth one.
Getting there. Okay, yeah.
The fourth one is the last one.
Okay.
Which is Friday, May 26, 1989 at Green River Community College.
Oh yeah, right.
Is there another one on as well as this?
No, the other one is us opening for them in Europe.
No, this is about the 4 times that they opened for us. So,
correct. Yes, absolutely.
The last show that we played with them, where they opened, was the last show we ever played with Scott.
Okay, that's probably true.
Things were not going well at all with him and the band and the energy. And I don't know if we had told him at this point that this was the last show. I really have no recollection. But this was the point at which it became painfully, painfully clear that Nirvana was no longer of a stature where they should be opening for us.
Now, that was the only time I ever saw them with Jason in the band.
Oh, yeah?
Jason Everman played that show.
Was really. And Dave Grohl was on drums.
No.
I'm almost positive.
No.
No?
The two of them were never in the band at the same time.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
Dave did not even join until after Skinyard was in Europe or whatever. I mean, it was still Chad.
Okay.
Remember that Jason is on the cover of Bleach.
Yeah,
I know. He was
Which
in the,
is funny because he's not on the record.
No, but he was in the band when right after that when Chad was in the band. So it had nothing to do with Dave Grohl.
I could have swore that Dave Grohl. Well,
Nope.
I believe you. I believe
It was
you.
Chad.
But what I do remember is they talk about a band slaying.
Oh yeah, they
my
were mighty.
God.
They were mighty.
Nirvana just destroyed, and it was painfully obvious that every single person in the room was there for that.
At that point, yeah. The next band was what? Bible Stud, I think.
Well, Bible Stud played first.
Did they?
Yes. And then Nirvana, and then us. And I remember we're like, oh shit. They just completely destroyed. And
True.
I remember almost immediately people started shuffling out of the room, and we were up there scrambling to get everything plugged in and ready to play, to at least try to hold some crowd. And this was last show with Scott. And I don't think we played very well, and things were tense in the band. It was just like, oh man. And it was after that we weren't really sure if we were going to continue to be a band or not. It was kind of the end of our whole cycle with Scott, and and we went into a year-long hibernation after.
14.
Close enough. And thankfully Barrett came in to restore everything and breathe new life into what I still consider to be the best record that the band ever did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no argument. So enough about that.
Okay, yes. Yeah,
Except
we're done.
that I have to say that, I think it was November of 91, Skinyard, we found ourselves in Europe with our guitars having been stolen from us.
And at this point, I was no longer in the band.
You weren't in the band anymore. We were over in Europe, and we had, I think 3 or 4 more shows left to go on the tour, but we had no guitars. So we had to basically phone ahead and check in with people and go, hey, can we borrow some guitars from whoever it is we're playing with?
Because you still had the drum kit.
We had the drums, we had the amps. They just grabbed the stuff that was easy to carry that had handles on it. They took the records, the T-shirts, and the guitars. And this was in Rome. We had to break into the van.
And cash? Did you have cash in the van too?
No, we didn't lose the cash.
That's good.
It was on our driver had that on her person, actually. So we wound up, there we are in Vienna and scheduled to open for Nirvana at this place called the Arena, which was just a big club. It wasn't really an arena. It was just the name of it. And, we basically had to go, look, we got fucked. What do we do, And so this was really funny because Kurt was going to give me a guitar, but it was left-handed.
Right.
I said,
of course.
Man, all right, and then, Chris, meanwhile, has a bass that has 2 straps,
yes.
2 straps.
I knew you were going to say this.
2 straps duct taped together end to end.
So they're down to Pat's knees, right?
Pat, who was the guy who took over for you, puts on this thing, and yes, it's hanging down to his ankles. And so, meanwhile, the second band on the bill was Urge Overkill, and they were nice enough to let us use their bass and guitar, and the show went on. And then our next night was playing with Urge Overkill at another club, and same thing, they let us use their gear. And then we went on to England and did 2 more shows and went home, and that was the end of the band.
And that was the end of the band.
We were so demoralized at that point, it was done. Ben went on and did Grunt Truck. Barrett was in the Screaming Trees literally a month later.
It was fast.
And I was like, the world wants me to be a record producer a lot more than it wants me to be a guitar player.
Yeah.
So I took the hint and, we were off.
But you continued to play music regardless.
Well, for a few years there, I didn't. The first few years of the 90s, I spent a lot of time traveling. And I didn't really get back into playing until about 96. I started playing with the rhythm section from The Accused. And we had a little band called the Suitcase Nukes for a couple of gigs.
Oh, I kind of remember that.
Yeah, that was a loud band. And it was too loud even for me.
Did you?
Yeah, the songs we recorded ended up on my last 2 solo records, actually.
Oh, okay.
I split them up between them. The first song on Permanent Fatal Error is actually with Josh and Alex on it.
Okay. Still my favorite of your solo records.
Yeah, thanks.
I love that record. I really do.
I'm pleased with it.
It's so good.
I wish it hadn't taken so long to make it. I'm at about one solo album per decade. So at this rate, I'm kind of behind.
Have you started working on the next one?
No.
No. Do you want to?
No.
Do you like the process of playing with other people more collaboratively in a band, down with people, as opposed
Yes.
to doing solo?
Or the improv band, because you see, yeah, I didn't make another solo record, but I made like, I don't know, 40 records worth of recordings with Beyond Captain Orca, and it was way easier than making another solo record.
Sure.
Life is
Well,
short.
but they're totally different processes, right?
Of course, exactly.
So it doesn't
That's
make
the
one
point.
right or wrong necessarily.
No. It's just maybe I've moved on to a different process at this point.
That's
But
fine.
I'm probably going to do something with Mia, my wife, actually. We've got some plans.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, so what? I mean, you don't have to talk about it, but I was surprised because MKB Ultra seems to be kind of having a lot of steam, and then it seemed to suddenly lose steam. I was just wondering what happened.
Suddenly lost steam because COVID freaking blew us out of the water, and that was the end of that.
But you could. I mean, are you thinking of restoring that?
we couldn't put it back together. It was
okay.
It was over.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it was kind of limping at that point anyway. So, it was time to move on. By the time the whole COVID preposterosity was over with, we had all lost interest.
So what are you thinking of doing with Mia now?
She's working on it. She's working on a solo record.
Can you talk about it?
Yeah, she's working on she records under the name Mia Catherine Boyle, and she's working on a record. Has been for a while.
Yeah.
Again, COVID kind of blew a hole in that whole process, but she's back to working on it, and I expect I'll probably record some of it, and I'll probably record all of it, and I'll probably end up playing on some of it too. Yeah,
right.
Of course.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there'll be various drummers on it, and we'll get something going. I mean, it's now that we live out in the country, the whole vibe is a bit different. Like,
right.
I stick my head out the door and I hear coyotes and owls and the occasional barking dog. So there's no, we don't have highway noise off in the distance or, we can see the freaking Milky Way when the sky is clear.
Yeah, I understand because I spent those 4.5 years living in Joshua Tree.
Yeah, so.
Similar reality.
Yeah, it's basically things happen when they happen, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But we're on a different time scale now.
So are you loving life living out of the city and out in the country instead?
I would say 100%. I am still working, mixing and mastering furiously.
Yeah.
The work continues to pour in on me. I'm just completely overloaded right now.
Which is great.
But the nice thing about it is I get to work at my own pace, and I'm not on the clock. I just charge people flat fees depending on how complicated the work looks. And I just do it until it's done and everybody's happy. And then, here's my PayPal account. So it's a lot less stressful than being on the clock and working in a studio and going, okay, that's all. We did like 2 hours and a half hour there. And then last Thursday we did an hour and a half. And, it's,
and to go in the studio, you either have to go, 3.5 hours north?
Yeah, I have to drive 3.5 hours north to Seattle to record at Soundhouse, which I still do.
Or an hour and a half potentially to Portland if somebody wanted you there. But then you'd have to learn a whole new studio.
Yeah, I'd have to learn a whole new studio. And I'm not really that interested in doing that. So, I mean, I go to Soundhouse about once a month and I just camp on the studio floor for a few days at a time. And
you kind of know the room.
I know the room rather well. I've been there for 20 years.
Oh, it's been that long, really?
Yeah, it was.
That's amazing.
So it's nice not living in Ballard and not living on that street that we lived on is now a busy arterial. It's like living on Highway 99.
Yeah, it's a main thoroughfare for sure.
It was a sleepy back street 20 years ago.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, it really was. It's different. So we're rolling with it out here.
Mm-hmm.
I spend a lot more time gardening.
That's great. The food's better.
It's ironic because somebody reminded me of something that I said in the Hype movie about sometimes wanting to move out to the country and just become a farmer.
Yeah. And here you are.
We freaking did it 30 years later.
That's good.
It's hilarious.
It's kind of funny you mentioned Hype because I just had a back and forth with Doug Prey. He's gonna he's going to hop on this and do an interview as well. So
That's great. I like Doug.
Doug's great.
Awesome.
And he's still so incredibly, he's kind of like you. He's still just like keeps working on projects, he's never really stopped.
Yeah,
And
no, he
I
doesn't.
love that.
I was in LA about, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago or something, and I looked him up, and he gave me a tour of, there was this crazy, he said, you got to come see the studio where they do video post for big movies.
Yeah.
And I think the place was called Todd A.O. or something. It was like a big Mondo Hollywood, studio where they assemble soundtracks. And he brought me in there, and it was basically a movie theater, an actual movie theater with no audience.
Oh, really?
And at one end of it was the gigantic screen that you project the movie on. But in the back of it, where you would normally be leaning over the railing trying to figure out which seat you're going to pick, there was this massive recording and mixing console. It was 30 feet long. And they were basically assembling at the moment we said, don't make any noise, but just watch what they're doing. They were assembling the soundtrack for this one little 1 minute chunk of some action movie. There was some helicopter on the screen with explosions and stuff. And you'd see them run the video and there would be there's the explosion sounds, and then they'd run it again, and then somebody would hit a button, and they weren't showing me. They were actually doing the work, ignoring me completely. It wasn't because of me. They just happened to be doing this work. Then you'd see they'd run the same scene with just the dialogue, and then they'd run the same scene with just the ambient sound. There'd be some wind sounds or something, and then there'd be one with just, the engine noise or something. It's just all this multi-track. They're basically doing multi-track mixing to create this surround soundtrack, and it was kind of an eye-opener. I'm making little punk rock records. It's not
2.1. It's 5.1 or...
It was 5.1 or whatever. I mean, it was what I do times 100.
Now they do 10.3,
It's insane. It's that's a field that I will never... I'm perfectly happy just making rock records. Thank you very much.
And I mean, why not? It's been one hell of a career. And
someone's got to do it.
It's far from over.
One would hope. I still have my hearing, which is shocking.
I have my hearing in one ear.
I have most of it in one ear.
My right ear is not very good because of Barrett Martin's snare and your guitar, which you always used to point side stage.
Of course.
So
I was didn't kill the audience.
So between those two, going straight into my ear, and of course, I was too cool for earplugs.
I was on stage right, which means my left ear was next to Barrett's ride cymbal.
Right.
And we're not just talking Barrett, we're talking Johnny Grazia Day, may he rest in peace, and Earthworm. And, every band I've been in has had ridiculously loud drummers. And even wearing earplugs for decades, it still takes a toll over time.
Sure.
So it is what it is. But I've diligently kept my ears in pretty good shape over the years.
That's good.
I do have to occasionally get somebody, sometimes I have to get a second opinion on tambourines.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of 18K and crazy high frequencies. And occasionally I have to turn to somebody and go, is that tambourine a little too loud? And it's usually, if there's a woman in the room, they'll be like, oh yeah, it's ripping my head off. And all the guys are like, what? Because the women have much better hearing by and large than the men do.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, it's a true thing.
That might explain why Patty's always telling me to turn it down.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. No, their hearing's not as damaged. And I think just intrinsically their hearing, it ages better than ours does. So, for the same reason we lose our hair, we probably lose our hearing over time.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No. What?
You've got longer hair, but I think I have more on top.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And you can still grow a better beard than I've ever been able to.
That's true. You weren't even shaving when you joined Skin Yard.
Barely. I think I shave every 2 weeks. Something like that.
That's true.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, this seems like a good endpoint.
Perhaps so.
Unless, I don't know.
Well,
let me ask you, just looking back on everything and where you are today, how are you reflecting on the last 40 years? It's been a pretty magnificent ride for you.
Well, the grunge thing blew up and I got to make records in 14 countries on 4 continents over the following 20 years after that. And in fact, I might have lost count. I might have missed one. And, that's been pretty cool because at this point I have clients. I call them clients, but people who send me stuff to work on way more than 14 countries. I mean, countries I've never even come close to send me work. They send me stuff to master or mix. So I'm still blasting away doing stuff as much as I can handle, basically.
Right. Right.
And I have to tell people, look, I don't turn things around overnight anymore. You might have to wait a few weeks for me to finish this particular thing because I've got 5 more things in the queue ahead of you. People are fine with that. And I go back and forth until people are happy. And if they're not happy, they don't owe me anything. I stand by my work. So I'm still doing fine as far as that goes. Sometimes it's funny that, people still talk about the 1 or 2 or 3 bands that I recorded before 1990, when there's been probably another 1,000 records I've worked on since then. But yet it's those other 1,000 records lead to the word of mouth that keeps my career going.
Right.
The downside is everything's online now, so people don't find out that I worked on a record until they just happen to accidentally discover it somehow because, Spotify doesn't have producer credits, or at least not last time I looked. So people don't even know that I'm still working. There's still people who write to me and they think the last thing I recorded was, Mudhoney or something like that. And it's like, well, actually, it would help if I updated my website, which I haven't done in 3 years. Anyway, easiest way to get a hold of me is jackendino.bandcamp.com. That way, I don't have to give out my email address. It just sort of surreptitiously takes a little mail form and shoots it over to my email, and I can decide whether to answer. And there's Facebook. I hardly ever look at it. There's Instagram. I look at it like once a month. Sorry if I didn't respond to your message. And and that's about my online presence, really.
Okay, well, it's been a hell of a ride. I'm psyched that we're still doing okay, both of us. I'm psyched that we're still...
I'd agree.
...talking with each other and...
Right.
And this might sound strange, but I'm kind of really excited for you being out in the country after 30 years of mentioning it on Hype. It kind of makes sense.
It's a little of an adjustment, but I'm kind of rolling with it, Learning how to maintain a riding mower, that was something. You know what I mean? I got a lawn, I got to mow it. A well, I got to figure out how to maintain the well. I had to install a heat pump, so now I know about heat pumps,
But you're also that guy.
Yeah, but a carpenter I am not. I know when to call in a professional.
Understood.
You know what I mean? Like the gutters, we had to call in. The painting, no, not me. Carpentry, no, forget it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com. And our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.